Seems like a good time to get started. So, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning to you based on where you're located. Welcome to our Carbon Solutions webinar series, where we like to highlight work we're doing within our company as well as with our partners. My name is Jacqueline, and I'm delighted to have each and every one of you joining us today. Today, Veronica will discuss the key responsibilities of landmen, more specifically, their importance in both traditional and renewable energy projects. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and you can view this presentation along with our other previously recorded webinars on our YouTube channel. We would like this to be more than a one-way conversation, so we encourage you to share your thoughts, questions, experiences, all that good stuff in the chat. We've dedicated some time for a Q&A session following Veronica's presentation, but feel free to drop your questions throughout the session as they pop up. Thank you again so much for being here, and I'll pass it over to Veronica. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Thank you for joining the webinar today, all. My name is Veronica Wild, and we will be going over the essential role of landmen in the energy sector, which is understanding and managing land rights. I'll be guiding you through the presentation. We'll focus on not only the managing of land rights, but all essential aspects of energy projects and how landmen are involved in it. I recently joined Carbon Solutions. In my previous role, I worked alongside a landman-specific undergraduate program, which aided in placing these students in industry. And amidst the addition of renewable energies, we've really seen an opportunity to continue focusing on the skill set that landmen provide the energy sector. To start, let's get an overview of the role of landmen in the energy sector and the importance of managing land rights. Landmen are crucial for the successful acquisition and management of land necessary for energy projects, and their experience ensures that all legal, regulatory, and environmental standards are met, paving the way for smooth project execution. So what exactly is a landman? Really, in simplest terms, it's the person that's standing on the porch, speaking with the landowner. It's the person sitting in a cubicle that's drafting the contract from the conversation of having spoken with the landowner. So in actual definition here, apologies all, it looks like I slipped slides. A landman is the public-facing side of oil and gas, mineral, or any other energy sources of exploration and production teams that interact and negotiate directly with landowners to acquire leases for the exploration and development of minerals or other energy sources. So, like I said, they specialized in land rights and agreements, and they serve as a bridge between the energy companies and the landowners. Their multifaceted skill set includes legal acumen and property and contract law, adept negotiation and communication abilities, and technical proficiency in GIS and land management tools. Altogether, these competencies empower landmen to orchestrate pretty intricate land transactions while nurturing productive relationships with the stakeholders involved, both internal and external. So there are various types of landmen, including in-house or company landmen and independent field landmen. These two terms, they overlap significantly in industry, just given the variety of how an energy company might operate, right? So company landmen generally handle negotiations, draft contracts, acquire leases, and ensure regulatory compliance within their organization, whereas an independent field landman will work on a contract basis, conducting research, negotiating leases, and managing landowner relations for their clients. Both play critical roles in securing land for energy projects, and a significant number of companies operate with a combination of these two landmen. So I do have a case study at the end of this webinar, and I'll go into some details about how exactly their duties differentiate if there is a company landman and an independent field landman on a project. Before that, I want to dive into the historical context and evolution of the landman profession. So the profession of landmen originated during the oil boom in the late 19th century, starting with the 1859 oil discovery in Pennsylvania. And over time, their roles have expanded and specialized, particularly with the advent of offshore drilling and environmental regulations that started to become more prominent in the mid-20th century. Today, landmen are adapting to even new challenges in renewable energy projects and even more regulatory environments that are being implemented at both the state and federal level for wind, solar, carbon, whatever it may be. A landman's job at the end of the day is to be the intermediary between the land and the operator. So their key responsibilities include comprehensive land research. For a field landman, this would look like conducting on-site investigations and directly engaging with the landowners by conducting physical surveys to gather detailed information about land ownership and title, any obstructions that may be in the way on the actual physical presence of the land. Whereas during the comprehensive land research phase, an in-house landman would support this work by analyzing public records and historical data to verify and corroborate with the findings of the field landman. And then they'd move into title examination and due diligence. A field landman would perform the initial assessment on site, again, such as identifying visible encumbrances, negotiating any final agreements with the landowner, etc. They then pass on that information to an in-house landman who will read the documents, the deeds, the mortgages, the tax records, and trace the ownership history, resolve any disputes or liens, and ensure that the title is clean. So it's really the back end of that conversation with the landowner. And then comes in the negotiation of land rights and leases. So the field landmen are the ones that are doing that negotiation with the landowners. They're building trust and securing preliminary agreements for the project to even begin moving forward. And the in-house landmen then formalize these agreements, ensuring all legal and regulatory requirements are met, and move into the regulatory compliance and documentation, which at that point, the field landman is really just on the sidelines. They're ensuring that the site is still suitable to comply with the regulations. At this point, a single land contract might have gone through hundreds of variations of drafting to get to finally securing an agreement that works for both parties. And the in-house landman would then draft and manage the contracts. And then, the project goes into place. The item gets built, the energy source is in place. How does that look for a landman? They continue their relationship. So a field landman will act as the company's representative in the community. They manage all of the daily interactions with the landowners and the local authorities, whereas an in-house landman would coordinate overall community communication strategies and ensure that all stakeholders, internal and external, are staying aligned amidst the project. In the historical timeline shown from the landman profession, we noted the addition of renewable energy technologies. I just touched on some of those key skills that are needed by a landman, and hopefully you're starting to see that those skills are transferable to renewable energy projects as we begin adding additional renewable energy sources to our grid. So landmen possess multiple transferable skills in their traditional energy teachings that include legal expertise, negotiation skills, technical proficiency, environmental stewardship, and project management. Their ability to navigate property law, build stakeholder trust, conduct price land research, and manage projects is critical for the successful evaluation of energy projects across different sectors. Land is needed, and those that can communicate with landowners tend to be a commodity in the energy sector. I thought it would be nice to jump into a little bit of a case study to see how this would actually apply for a landman if a project was going forward. So let's look at a case study of a carbon sequestration project. Let's say that this project involves developing a large-scale carbon sequestration site across 15,000 acres, and we'll be nice and say it only involves 85 landowners, but it spans across multiple states. Landmen are playing a vital role in not only the site selection, but the landowner identification, negotiation, regulatory compliance, and community engagement throughout this entire process. But this is what we know about the project so far. So during site selection, there is a handful of people that work alongside of field landmen. GIS specialists and environmental scientists use advanced mapping tools and environmental data to identify optimal sites for carbon sequestration. And the field landman conducts preliminary site visits to verify suitability and gather initial data. We already know that they've identified their 85 landowners over this 15,000 acre project area. The landman's job is to gather contact details for all 85 of those landowners, to introduce the project, and to assess the willingness to participate. The in-house landman would support the process by providing background information and assisting with initial communications. So this could be everything from determining who the actual owner of a property is. Are there multiple owners? Are there liens against the property? Do they already have some sort of royalty agreement in place with another person that overlaps on property acreage? All of these would take into consideration and be accounted for by the field and in-house landmen both. When they move into the land acquisition and negotiation phase, again, this is when the field landman is directly engaging with all of those 85 landowners to negotiate lease agreements. And more often than not, those 85 agreements are not going to look the same from landowner to landowner. It gets very technical. And the discussions include terms related to annual lease payments and compensation for carbon credits, all of which, dependent on the project, could vary drastically. In-house landmen and legal advisors then ensure that all the agreements made by the field housemen are legally sound and compliant with relevant laws across different states. So as I said in the project or in the case study, right, this goes across different states, but when you're working with titling and land and law that's associated with projects and pulling permits associated with projects, you're not only looking at the state laws, but you're looking at federal laws as well. And so having a landman that understands the area, understands the communities being impacted, and the landowners that will be impacted by a project are very beneficial in all areas of energy. So once the environmental impact assessment process is thoroughly conducted by the environmental scientists, in-house landmen will compile all of these findings into comprehensive reports for regulatory review, and regulatory specialists ensure that all necessary mitigation measures are included to comply with environmental regulations. And then comes the permitting process, right? And that would also fall in the in-house landman and regulatory specialist area to prepare the permit applications, which would include the environmental and land use approvals, at which point the legal advisors would review these applications to ensure compliance with all state and federal requirements. The collaborative effort is critical to navigating the regulatory landscape. And again, through community engagement, the construction and development, and the operations and monitoring, these landmen stay consistently connected to the landowners that are being affected by the project. I personally know some landmen that have had 30-plus-year relationships with some landowners that they've negotiated leases with in the very early years of their career. And it's pretty amazing to see how well landmen as a profession tend to be at not only maintaining communication, but doing what's best for all stakeholders involved. So what are some challenges that may arise? It's an energy project, right? We've already touched on this a little bit, but regulatory complexity is a big one. Landowner trust and engagement. Environmental, technological, and logistical concerns are all a combination of challenges that present themselves throughout a project. They face a myriad of regulatory challenges amidst the environmental access permits, the permitting requirements that can change on a dime, and the adherence to all of the state and federal laws, including accounts by the Bureau of Land Management and navigating regulatory landscapes, which can, based off of BLM's data, delay project timelines by an average of 6 to 12 months. So why does this all matter, this one landman piece, right? A study by the Energy Information Administration indicated that projects managed by skilled landmen achieve higher compliance rates, with up to 95% of projects meeting or exceeding regulatory requirements. This success is attributed to thorough land research, meticulous due diligence, and proactive stakeholder engagement managed by landmen. To go into a recap of a landman's role, right, they're pivotal in negotiating land leases, securing titles, and maintaining compliance with complex regulatory frameworks. Their work ensures the legal and operational integrity of energy projects, and their unique skills of landmen are essential in managing the multifaceted aspects of energy projects, from engaging with landowners to coordinating environmental assessments and regulatory approvals. Hopefully this shorter than I expected, but sweet webinar presents the opportunity for you all to understand a little bit more about how a landman interacts with the larger energy sector, and the differentiation between a landman that might be standing on somebody's front door to speak about project going in place years before that project is ever set to break ground, versus an in-house landman that is the person kind of behind the drafting of those contracts and agreements that took place in conversation, and the multi-areas of a project that continuously feed back to the landman in regard to the centralized person for communication on a project. And with that, I will go ahead and go into the Q&A. Thank you all for learning a little bit about landmen today and their role in the energy sector, how their skill set is being applied as we add more renewable energy types to our grid. And I really think that this is kind of a profession that is highly pinned to traditional energy. And should it be? Absolutely not. It's just as applicable to renewable energy projects as well. And we're starting to see that translate in industry. So at this point, I really have not seen any projects in my own scope of understanding with landmen and contract work that have not required an environmental assessment. I don't believe that it's because it's across multiple states, regardless of the project size. Some variation of an environmental assessment will be present in the contract negotiations when determining the site availability by the landowners. So we had a question, could there be a conflict of interest for landmen that work for a developer? For instance, wouldn't it be in the landman's best interest to sign up as many landowners as possible, as quickly as possible at the lowest price for their land? Would that be in the best interest of the landowner? Question mark. So one piece that is very specific to a landman's title in the energy profession is a registered landman certification. And a registered landman certification includes a continuation of guidelines for maintaining integrity amidst these conversations. I believe that is a showing of our industry's effort to curb some of what might have been happening in the beginning days of energy production. And I would say, given the requirements around how landowners interact with landmen, regardless of if they're independent landmen or if they're acting on behalf of a company, are highly regulated at this point. So I would say, while maybe in the beginning days of a traditional energy landman, they would be wanting to go for the best interest of who they're representing, right? The company, or if they're an independent acting landman on contract with a private developer, of course, they're acting as that intermediate between the final contract that should be beneficial for both the landowner and the operator. But the policies that have been implemented on behalf of the American Association of Professional Landmen have really helped curb the moralities that might have taken place to result in what wasn't best for the landowner. At what point in project development do landmen reach out to communities? So this would vary widely based on the project. I would say drastically in line with initial findings. For instance, I was just interacting with a landman that is actually just surveying land for a carbon sequestration project. They haven't even secured the permitting or the processing available for this project. And if anything, they'll be applying for the permits 18 months from when they sent him out to review the land. That was a relatively small project. Some larger projects, there could be 20, 25 landmen on a massive scale of a project, right? And all of those landmen are going to be sanctioned at different areas to different regions and hopefully coordinating amongst one another. So I wouldn't say there's any specific timeline for associating with a project of when a landman is there, aside from at the very, very beginning. They should, in most cases, be the first touch point for an energy developer looking at a community. Do most large energy project developers only contract full-time land or only contract landmen, or do some have full-time landmen on their team? So most large-scale private contract or private energy developers have full landman team, in-house landmen. They work alongside the division order analyst and the regulatory groups on the internal team. And most of those larger companies have a mix of both in-house landmen and out-house landmen, field house landmen, apologies. Are there any new types of technology that landmen are adopting that you predict they will start adopting? Probably the largest area of technological advancement in regard to the landman's profession in particular is GIS mapping, land data that's more widely available. A landman at one point was going down to the court records house and tracking title from original ownership. And given technological advances of today, a lot of that is not necessary. And again, in the GIS mapping and the software availability for land tracking, there's been significant technological advancements. So the underlying assumption here is that the rights to the empty rock pore space will belong to the landowner, just as they would if that pore space were occupied by a valuable mineral such as oil. That is, pore space rights are being assumed to the equivalent to mineral rights. Pore space, mineral rights, air rights, all have different levels of regulation, and how you can negotiate with the landowner varies drastically across those different spaces. So this would fall down to the actual individual conversation with said landowner. What spaces do they have available? Are they already under contract with another private developer that already holds royalties over an area of their land? So how much certainty is there that pore space rights for CO2 storage will be defined just like mineral rights? I wish I had more legal expertise to answer that question. That is still a developing area for understanding. I mean, when air rights were essentially surface rights, subsurface rights, pore space, as these various areas have been defined, as we've introduced new types of energy, I can't say with any type of certainty that pore space rights for CO2 will be defined exactly like mineral rights, and I can't speak to the timeline in which that would take place or present itself in industry. And I guess one other clarification, right, is there's massive differences in jurisdiction when it comes to speaking about pore space as well. So across states, pore space rights are treated distinctly different. And that could be a situation of perhaps you have two in-house landmen that are absolutely phenomenal understanding one state's regulations, and you're looking at developing in another state, right? Most likely your in-house landmen won't know the ins and outs of pore space in regard to CO2 storage if they hadn't operated in a state previously or dealt with contract negotiations previously that addressed it. So that's really when realizing that the role of a landman is regional identification and stakeholder management comes down to them having to understand the regulatory frameworks that are in their operational space. I think we have. Sorry, y'all. Sorry, I just lost my question window, but I saw we had one more.
I can read it to you, Veronica.
Oh, I found it. If
Okay,
watering
great.
of the storage reservoir is necessary for a CCUS project, would the landman be responsible for addressing disposal of dewatering waste as well? In most cases, a landman would play a pretty big role in addressing the disposal of dewatering waste for CCUS projects, mostly because they maintain the role of managing the legal, regulatory, and logistical aspects that are related to that land use. So they would have to secure the necessary permits, rights, and agreements for both the use of the land management and any byproducts or waste produced during the project. All of that would fall under the original land agreements. So for dewatering specifically, appropriate permits are secured, right? Compliance with environmental regulations for the dewatering, and then managing your stakeholders to ensure that they understand the process for which that will take place. That would all take place with the landman's conversation and would be included in the conversation as well. And I guess, Lori's question is a perfect opportunity to highlight what I pointed out earlier, which is that the project's going. The thing was built. The energy source is being captured or being extracted, whatever it may be. Regardless of that, the landman is still the one that's could be on a daily basis having conversations with that landowner, especially if the landowner resides on residence, right? They could see something happening and who are they going to call? Somebody at that big, huge company that placed that on their land, or are they going to call the landman that was their original point of contact? So really from start of conversation to while the project is up, running, going through the project's lifetime, and what happens long after the project is complete, all falls back onto the original agreement that the landman secured with the landowner.
Okay, great. If there are no more, oh, we got one more. Perfect.
Do you have any comparable pay structure for land agents, and what metrics do you recommend to track land agent performance? So the pay structure for land agents can vary depending on the company region and the specific roles, right? They might just only be assigned to an in-house portion of the contract negotiations. They might be completely field landmen. So drastic variances in the base salary when it comes to landmen. I would say what's a good metric for tracking land agent performance? Number of successful negotiations would be a huge one, right? Deal volume and value for both the landowner and the project holder. And then compliance and accuracy, right? An agreement that takes place at the very beginning conversation of a project could potentially be a hurdle 6 to 9 to 12 months down the road, should those compliance and regulatory metrics not be considered in the evaluation process for the initial contract with the landowner. Since CO2 storage is permanent, who will the landman turn monitoring duties over to, and when is the landman's job done once injection of CO2 stops? So in the context of CCUS projects where CO2 storage is considered permanent, the role of the landman typically transitions once the operational phase, such as the CO2 injection, is completed, but the responsibilities might not end upon the cessation of injection due to the long-term nature of CO2. So often transition of monitoring duties. So they transfer off the monitoring duties to a regulatory agency or a private special entity, or the company that operates the CCUS project may return long-term monitoring responsibilities as part of the operational mandate that was established in the original contract. So post-injection, post-closure obligations, documentation and reporting, and then continued stakeholder engagement. I did miss one question. Can you speak to the current availability of landmen slash agents around the country, and where do you see the greatest needs? Um, it really notoriously has fallen the price per barrel of oil. And that's something that I repeated pretty continuously in my previous role in recruiting for one of these energy programs that place students into landman positions. And really, I think that that is completely dependent on the fact that landmen have been associated with traditional energy, which hopefully I've showed in this presentation that their skill set is highly transferable as we add additional energy sources to the mix. Because of this, there has been an increase in the number of landmen available coming out of the undergraduate level and the graduate level. There are 10 AAPL accredited undergraduate programs that specialize in placing landmen in industry. And 6 of those 10 have begun showing growth rates over the last couple of years. But it's still an area that I think was about to die with traditional energy. And people said that this role was tied to traditional energy, when in actuality, all energy projects need somebody that understands the law behind the land for that project. And that's really where Landman comes in. And it's kind of a funny mix of both a legal personality and just being highly personable and able to have conversations with landowners. Where we see the greatest needs right now is definitely in the renewable energy space. So the American Association of Professional Landmen has released a renewable energy certificate, and really that certificate was focused solely at a landman's skill set and which ones were transferable into the renewable energy sector. And so from the ground basis of industry organizations, they're starting to implement educational trainings that will hopefully assist with some of our traditional landmen that have been in industry for quite some time, making that move over to renewable energy. Well, thank you all for hopping on with me today. And I apologize, I cruised through it a little quicker than I anticipated, but I appreciate all of the thorough questions and invite anybody to follow up with me after the presentation if you just want to learn a little bit more about Landmen.